friend of hers and actually helped her daughter with a school project on mobile phones. But I never ever had the courage to tell her that I wanted to worship her as an astronaut, because her entire talk was actually about how being an astronaut doesn't define you, and there's more to life than one particular incident. But the thing about Cafe Sci is it's about open science, and it's about a sort of transparent science, and it's more of a conversation than a talk or a lecture. So it's not a traditional scientific format, and we don't follow the authoritative sort of aims, methods, results, conclusions type of thing, or talking from authority. After a while, attending the Kingston Cafe Sci, I thought, well, my hometown of Woking doesn't have one, and we didn't have a university, so I set up our own. And in fact, we were hosted by a wine bar that had just recently established itself in Woking. They were delighted to have science on the menu on a Tuesday. And we started from there, with me recruiting the speakers. I got in touch with Anne Grand, who is the international coordinator, and I think almost a founder member of Cafe Sci International. I believe that it's present in almost all the countries in the world, in actual fact. It's an international movement that's been going for some time. And when I asked her what you did, she basically said, well, whatever you want. That's actually a very open science. So we are different, to answer Nikki's question, from something like TEDx, in the sense that TEDx has a much more formal structure to it. So you've got the 18-minute rule for speaking. You're broadcasting, it tends to be very polished, very professional. You need to be quite practiced at it. Whereas Cafe Sci is more of an open forum for people who've got an interest, a passion, just want to talk about something scientific that's interesting them. Having said that, we are very different from any other format in that every Cafe Sci is unique. They're all completely different. I've talked at Cafe Sci's in Bristol and Salisbury. Salisbury had about 120 people turn up, sitting theatre style in the rugby club, in the bar. Bristol, you're in a back room of the pub. Woking Cafe Sci was in the wine bar, and then moved to the cafe, an ordinary cafe in our local art gallery. And then when we outgrew that, we got sort of booted upstairs into a seminar room. And university ones tend to be a little bit more formal. The ones that aren't directly associated with the university tend to be a little freer. And ours in Woking really defined science, because I recruited the speakers, as anything I thought was basically interesting. So the idea behind it is that you can set up your own. And actually, that's something that James and I have been talking about, because with the Cyber Cafe Sci, which James kindly set up for us when we couldn't meet in person due to the lockdown, we found that we can reach out to more speakers, because you don't have to be able to get to Woking on a Thursday evening. Not that getting to Woking on a Thursday evening is a bad thing, and we'll take you to Pizza Express if you do come over. But also we get a much wider audience. And it seems a shame, really, that shouldn't spawn, if you like, local Cafe Sci's which actually meet face to face. So that's something I think I'd like to start to encourage. James set up the Cyber Cafe Sci really on his own initiative. I mean, he's spoken at our Cafe Sci's in Woking, and he's a techno person in much more than I am. I can tell you how all the technology works, and so can James. James can actually work it as well, which I generally can't. And we use the Zoom platform for that. And I think you've got the professional Zoom license, James, which gives you this format, which is the webinar format.
Yeah,
that's
it's the webinar license rather than the pro license, and I found I can use it for all sorts of things where it's quite handy and just helps to keep things organized.
Yeah, and it seems to work quite well. I mean, the normal Zoom, I think everybody sees everybody else unless you just put it on speaker view and it highlights. But in the background, in this kind of thing, James is setting up the streaming to all of the various recording or live streaming services, and he's monitoring questions that come in, not just through the Zoom portal, but also through things like Twitch, whatever Twitch might be, and through YouTube. And I think the last one we had, James, was quite interesting, because tell me what Twitch is, because it's not what I thought. It's something to do with gaming.
Yeah, so Twitch it's now an Amazon service because they bought it, I think. But it's basically started out as a game streaming platform, so people would log on to it, play games, and stream themselves playing games. Since then, it's expanded a bit, and there's people doing crafting, all sorts of other things, and it's free to stream to. So because it's free to stream to, and I already had all of the setup on the back end, I just added Twitch to it. But the last one we had with Exploding Stars, we actually had someone stumble across the Twitch channel, which was really interesting because they'd obviously been looking for something to kill time, and instead of seeing a game, they'd come across Dr. Stivons talking about supernovae. It turned out they were a first-year physics students, so they started throwing in questions from the Twitch channel. And it's not something we could ever really have had with the physical cafe size. We did occasionally have people wandering in, but to be honest, they tended to be more disruptive than helpful, usually, because they were out there for a night out, not to talk about science. But just having these extra channels where people can stumble across us and they can engage with science, it's absolutely brilliant. I'm really pleased with it, and I was really pleased that we managed to hook in someone who otherwise wouldn't ever have been exposed to it.
Yeah, and on people just stumbling into a Cafe Sci, I've thought that is a part of the experience that we have. So just to emphasize, a Cafe Sci is free to attend. I mean, you can make a donation if you wish, because there are some costs associated with it, but it's a basic fundamental principle that science is made freely available, and it's open to anyone to attend. So anyone you like can come in to a Cafe Sci, whatever age you are, child or over 100, it doesn't matter. And I think we've probably had some people who certainly looked extremely old when they came in, bright as a button, and we've also had children at the physical ones. When we set up in the wine bar, they opened specially for us on a Tuesday evening, which was a quiet night for them. But the wine bar in Woking is actually on the way home from the station, so it's just outside the station. And of course, people drop in, and we welcomed that because it's quite good. It meant that people would see this Cafe Sci was on. We had a sign out there saying it was open and free for people to attend. And I think that's really a very good way of doing science, that people just happen upon us. And we had some very regular attendees who two of them literally stumbled in because I think they were on a drinking session on every station between Waterloo and Southampton at the time. But they were very friendly indeed, and they became regular Cafe Sci attenders in Woking because they enjoyed it so much. There is a problem with that as well, of course, because if you make yourself incredibly open, particularly in an open format like a wine bar, people come in who don't realize there's a Cafe Sci. And so as we sort of grew, we had the conflict between people who were there to listen to someone talk and people who had walked into an open wine bar wanting a glass of wine. And that's an interesting experience because you have to stand up at some point and say, now we're going to have a talk. I used to wander around everyone beforehand saying, are you here for the Cafe Sci? And if they said no, I'd say, well, you wish you were and you're going to enjoy it. But it can become disruptive if people won't stop. And so I won't pretend that it's an easy format. And I think that might possibly happen on cyber Cafe Sci's as well. You could get people who just stumbled upon it and aren't particularly interesting. I suppose they'd go away, but they might talk about it. What are our future ambitions for the cyber Cafe Sci? Over to you for the moment, James, and then I'll pitch in.
Yep, I'm going to grab that one. So it's actually something we've been talking about and thinking about quite a lot recently, particularly as lockdown's being eased. And this was started up just to give people something to do, give people a way to engage with science. The first talk was on how you assess the reliability of medical tests in a roundabout way, and we've had a few topical ones since then. But one of the things we have had is this amazing international engagement. I've had a load of feedback from people, which I'm really pleased with and was quite surprised about, where there's this thing in academia where you get a platform because you're respected. And to be respected, you need to have a platform. And there are some really passionate, really enthusiastic people out there, and they might not be academics in any form. A lot of them are students or postgraduate students who are early stage in their research career, and they just don't get a chance to talk about their research, and the research is absolutely fascinating. It's brilliant. I mean, tonight we've got Jada, who's going to be talking about sharks, and I didn't know until just a few days ago that the likelihood of being hit in the head by a flying shark is higher than being hit in the head by a meteorite, which I still love as a fact, and that you might get hit by a shark while paragliding because they can leap 30 feet in the air. So there's all of these things that I didn't know, other people didn't know, and from the audiences we're hearing it's things people want to know and want a chance to find out. So the future ambitions for Cafe Sci, firstly, it's not to stop it when we're able to all travel around freely and go to wine bars again. As was mentioned, spawning local Cafe Sci's would be a fantastic aim. We'd love to do that and help local Cafe Sci's set up and use this as a way to get people engaged and get them able to set up something in their local coffee shop. But the main ambition is to keep it going, to keep interesting talks coming. There may be some announcements coming up over the next few weeks or the next month or so. I need to talk to some people to sort that out. But basically, it's to keep that philosophy of open science, engagement of science with the public, with everyone and anyone who's interested in it, and giving a platform to anyone who is doing interesting scientific research or has looked at an interesting scientific subject. So I've spoken at one before, and I'm not an academic. I have studied, but that was actually after my first Cafe Sci talk. And I am talking about security, but I think security is a science. We're trying to arrange, and again, this is going back to my own interest, but we're trying to arrange something about steganography in art, which I'd still argue is scientific. So we can have this much broader, much less strictly defined idea of what science is and what people can talk about, while still keeping up the standard of, yes, it has to have a scientific approach. You have to be studying it, thinking about it, evidencing it, researching it and working on it. Whether that's with the backing of a university or not is a different issue. Hopefully that answers a bit about the future ambitions. And as I said, there may be more announcements coming up. I do just need to clarify a few things before I say anything official there. And the favorite new thing I've learned through Cafe Sci was actually last Thursday, where I learned that supernovae are oblong. So I'd always assumed they were round, that they were spherical, but no, apparently they are sort of egg-shaped oblong things instead. Chris, are you still there? I've also learned that Chris's internet is particularly unreliable. So, Chris, hello? Nope. Okay.
Did you go offline then, or did I go offline?
You went offline.
Right.
There was a second question. I'll let you do the ambition one as well, because you will have a slightly different perspective than me. But one that came in was, what's the favorite thing you've learned through Cafe Sci?
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Cyber Cafe Sci specifically. Let's not do the whole 7 years, the last couple of months only.
Cyber Cafe Sci, I think it's I think what I've learned is the value of people who I wouldn't have automatically thought of as, how am I going to say this, as interesting speakers. It's the sheer variety of people out there who not only have something very interesting to say about science, but are incredibly willing to say it to a live audience, even if they haven't done so before. And to me, that's actually, I suppose in a way it's not eye-opening, because I've worked with students and I've seen that they could do these things, and some do, but I think it's the general eclecticness of people and the fact that everybody out there has some science in them at some point.
Mostly anyway. There are some people who definitely don't, but yeah, there is a lot more to science than a strict view of it.
Yeah, and to add to what you just said, or interrupt you on what you just said, James, in terms of the what I think they call them early career researchers or early career academics, these are people who don't necessarily get a platform to present but want to. And Cafe Sci obviously feeds into that and exploits it as well, because it's extraordinarily interesting to hear people who are actually working on things rather than have already established their reputations. But there's also what I always have to call ordinary people. There ought to be a name for them. The people do science. People have something scientific about them. And I said earlier that I always interpreted science very widely as anything that interested me that could vaguely be shoehorned into it. And I do think that there is an opportunity for ordinary people who are not traditionally regarded as scientists who would talk about science to say things on the Cyber Cafe Sci platform. We had some instances of that at our live Cafe Sci. Somebody talked about the secret of happiness and how to cut camembert, and how to cut camembert turned out to be very interesting. At least that was you get interesting perspectives on this. I won't go into the talk on owls, because that was actually probably one of our best, but also the most car crash presentation that I've ever heard at a Cafe Sci. But it was also brilliant in its way. And I think you get this tremendous variety in people's ability to talk about science, what they're interested in, and their background on it. And one of my favorite ones was actually Will Booker, because I grabbed him because his name was Dr. Batman. His PhD was in Batman studies, and he was widely reviled in the tabloid British press for having studied Batman. And he then went on to research David Bowie. And he lived as David Bowie for a year, 9 to 5, because David Bowie was basically David Bowie 9 to 5. So he looks like David Bowie, still acts like him. I think it's infected him, forever. But I asked him to talk about the science of David Bowie, or the science of what he was trying to do. And that was interesting, because we made it a conversation, but Will reckons he's absolutely definitely not a scientist. So that's quite interesting when you've invited someone onto a Cafe Scientific to have a conversation about science, and you want to talk to them about how scientific was their study. So the science in being David Bowie is embodiment. So it's a sort of a way of understanding things by being them. For me, it would be, I pretend I'm a water molecule. So I imagine what it's like to be a water molecule. Einstein did that all the time. Famously, he imagined standing on a light wave and traveling with it. And I think that was before surfing really took off. But if he'd been alive later, he would have talked about being a beach boy surfing on a light wave. And that idea is thinking yourself into a situation, or even acting it out. Stand on a surfboard and surf a monster wave packet and feel what it's like. But some people don't realize they're doing science and will in fact deny it, but there is something scientific in there. And I do think that the Cafe Sci platform gives you the ability to listen to those kind of things. Just one other thing, because I know I'm going on a bit, but our Cafe Sci grew quite a lot. I mean, we've been exceeding the capacity of the seminar room that we have at the Lightbox Gallery, which I think is about 50. So, and that's good. And when we started up, we didn't allow people to use projection aids or PowerPoints and things, but then gradually we did. And so in one sense, you'd regard that as a tremendous success. But in a way, to me, it sort of moved us a bit away from being what we started as, which was, an eclectic random group of people who happened to be in a wine bar and shouted out to someone standing at the bar, tell us the one about the cosmic rays, and then someone would just hold forth. And I think that in a way, my ambition for the Cyber Cafe Scientific would be that it spawn, if you like, more smaller local gatherings. It isn't about numbers. It's not about becoming a mega platform. And the first question we had was, how are we different from TEDx? Well, we're different from TEDx because I don't think I would ever have as an aim to attract a huge audience. What I have is an aim to interact with and hear, speak and talk to people who are interested in science. And that conversation can take place almost better with a smaller platform, smaller numbers of people. So that goes along with James's thing about trying to encourage the establishment of local cyber cafe size or special interest cafe size or time zone cafe size, but also genuine local groupings where 6 people say, well, why don't we go down the cafe and talk about science, and we'll get someone to discuss it. So it's a sort of crowdsourcing or something, micro local, you local in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, and the new question that's come in about the wide variety of speakers, most of the answer, I believe, is Twitter. There are other parts to the answer, but I think 90% of our speakers come through Twitter because one of the people involved has seen an interesting tweet and goes, hey, would you like to do a talk? And most of the time, in fact, almost all of the time, the answer we get back is, yes, I'd love to. About half of the time, that then goes on to getting a date arranged and doing the actual talk rather than it trailing off, because people are hard to pin down at times. But it really is just by engaging with people who've got something to say and saying, here's your chance, we'll give you a platform, we'll give you an audience. There are people who want to hear it.
Yeah, and also people do recommend people. So people approach me sometimes and say, you ought to get in touch with so-and-so because they're interesting, or I remember people that I met, in the past. There's a couple of blacksmiths at the University of Kingston who talked to me for about 5 minutes about all the properties of hot metal. And I've got them on my list, but it's taken me 3 years to get around to sending them an email. So you get to meet quite a lot of people, and I think they offer themselves. It's not always easy to actually get people to confirm and sign up. And I think that's something that James has helped a lot with in this. Running this forum every week is quite testing because you have to have a speaker every week. I used to struggle to get them every month. Well, I didn't struggle. We always got a speaker every month, and there was always one lined up. But people would drop out, or there'd be a misunderstanding or something like that. So you need really more than those speakers. But I think James is right. I'm a Twitter fanatic, and I tweet a lot. And if someone says something interesting on Twitter now with this forum, I tend to say, hey, you could talk about that. And here is one of those people, Jada. Hey, welcome.
Hello. We've got them all warmed up for you.
Awesome.
We did a warm-up act. Yeah, we didn't get around to the comedy routine.
That's debatable. I think we probably did about half an hour ago. The comedy routine started, but I'd like to introduce you all to Jada Elcock, Sophistication, and I believe you're being accepted, about to start a graduate program.
Yes, that is correct.
Yep.
I was just accepted to the University of Washington in the United States, and I'm very excited. I will be hopefully pursuing a PhD, but I'm starting out with a master's and potentially transitioning into a PhD when that's done. Just kind of depending on how life works out, because you never really know what's going to happen. But yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and I really want to hear about the sharks, honestly. That's why we invited you. So if you're happy to jump straight in, we can start on the sharks now.
Yeah, sure. I will point out real fast, though, that my shirt is a hammerhead shark riding a bicycle.
I did say I'd go aquatic, so...
I have a lot of... Sorry, my dog is in here as well. Just a little warning about that. He gets very...
It's fine. You may see cats going past at some point. So these things
Fantastic.
happen.
Awesome. Yeah, but I do have a lot of shark clothing actually. So this one's pretty funny. Sharks of the World, just completely nonsense. I think my favorite is the Octo Shark. That's a good one. I've got this one, Sharks Make Me Happy, You Not So Much. That one makes me laugh. I wear that one pretty regularly. Recently for Christmas, my mom got me this one. It's a Christmas tree shark thing. It's really funny. So yeah, that's kind of my little shark wardrobe for you. But to talk about actual sharks, I will share my screen. Actually, this says that I can't do that.
Oh, right. I will let you share your screen
Okay.
in a moment. If I can just work out how. There we go. But just for everyone in the audience, the way this runs is very informal. If you have questions, drop them into the Q&A and we will rudely interrupt Jada and ask the questions, or put them in the chat. If you've got any technical problems, put them in the chat, because then I can reply to you privately and we can sort out any issues you're having. And that's about it. So Jada, please.
Awesome. Okay. So I have made this PowerPoint full of sharks, and I think I did a good job of including a lot of sharks that people might not have heard about before. So yeah, I guess we'll get into it. There's my Twitter handle if you want to follow me. I make fun animal fact videos every day. Oh my goodness. There we go. So there are a huge variety of sharks. First of all, they are related to rays and skates, which some people don't know that. And a lot of people don't really know what skates are. That would be, can you guys see my cursor? This guy right here. Very similar to a stingray, but they're a little bit different. But sharks alone have such a huge variety. There's over 500 species of sharks, and they differ by pretty much any aspect of their life that you could possibly think of: shape, size, habitat, abilities, social behaviors, mode of feeding, mode of reproduction, all of it. So I'm going to kind of go through each one of these little categories and kind of share a few different sharks within those categories. And I think that that will kind of give you a really good view of how crazy different all of these sharks can be. So shape, of course, we have to address hammerheads, because that's just the most ridiculous head shape you've ever seen. Like, kind of makes you wonder how that happened evolutionarily. Like, why did they become so strange looking? Basically, what we know is that hammerheads use this shape of their head for a lot of different things. It helps with eyesight, so they have like a bigger 360, not completely 360, but they have a larger view of what's around them. Their nostrils are on the sides of their head, so they can pick up scents from a larger area. That's really helpful. And a lot of species also hunt stingrays, so they will use it to pin a stingray to the floor and then twist and bite into the stingray so then it can't get away, and it's an easy way to get a meal. The mako shark, this one right here, looks like a torpedo. It's very streamlined, very hydrodynamic, and that's because it's built for speed. It is the fastest shark in the entire ocean. They can go, I want to say, at bursts of 65 miles per hour, and I realized that I forgot to do that conversion into kilometers per hour, so I apologize for anyone that doesn't really know miles per hour. But they are incredibly fast animals, and that's because they hunt incredibly fast animals like tuna and things like that. Then you have this hilarious flat shark over here, this Wobbegong shark, and they look so weird because they're ambush hunters. So they've got this weird coloration, they're flat, they have these tassels on their mouth, basically helps them blend into coral reefs or whatever substrate that they're living on, so that their prey can't see them coming, and it just can suck it right in without the prey even realizing what's happening, which I think is awesome. I got to work with one when I was an aquarium intern, and it was the coolest thing. He was adorable. And then we have the thresher shark down here with this crazy long tail that's basically the same length as the rest of its body. And that's because they also use that for hunting, which sounds kind of crazy. You'd think maybe it's for speed or for something else, but it's actually for hunting. So what they do is they swim as fast as they can into a big school of fish. They'll turn their pectoral fins downward, to stop themselves on a dime and use that tail as a whip to stun and kill any fish in the area. And then they can just kind of slowly go through and collect any of the fish that are stunned or dead. So I think it's a pretty efficient mode of hunting. Rather than chasing something down like the mako shark and using all that energy, you just have to swim a shorter distance and you've pretty much got a meal.
We've got a couple of questions. One's more of a statement saying we do miles per hour in the UK, which I completely disagree with and think is a generational difference. We do metric nowadays, except when you're driving or if you're sailing when it's not. The other one is looking at what I think is a myth. Is it true that all sharks have to be constantly on the move or they die?
That's not true. I actually am going to get into that a little bit later, but there are some sharks that don't have to keep moving in order to die. So like the wobbegong, it can sit on the floor and just keep breathing. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later, but yeah, that's actually a myth.
And who named it the wobbegong? Where does the name come from?
Fantastic question. I honestly have no idea, but people have made, it's either pronounced wobbegong or wobbegong, and people have made so many jokes about it. They're like, hey, what does a shark say when they're shooting a basketball? They go, Wobie. And I think that's pretty funny because like Kobe. It's so ridiculous, but I think it's hilarious.
We've got another couple. You may have quite a few before you get off this slide. What shark is the chonkiest? Do sharks have blubber?
I don't think sharks have blubber, no, because they don't. A lot of sharks are how you would think of as cold-blooded, so they don't really need to keep themselves warm on the inside. And there are actually a few warm-blooded species of sharks, which I will also get into later, but they have different modes of keeping themselves warm. So they don't have blubber. They're just, I guess that's more of like a mammal thing, but yeah, they don't have blubber, which is interesting.
And is the white fringing part of the wobbegong or wobbegong?
The which one?
The white fringing, I think was mentioned. I'm not sure.
The white fringing is in like this bottom part down here?
Sarah, if you stick your hand up, if it is that bottom part down there. Yes, that white bottom part down there.
Yes, these little tassels, that is part of the shark.
There you go.
Interesting. I think they use it kind of to lure in prey, maybe kind of like a lure, I guess. Yeah, would be the perfect word for it.
Good, because that was the next question that just flew in.
Great.
And Michael was saying he grew up hearing there were 350 species of sharks. Have there been a lot of species discovered more recently?
I think there have been. So I was actually doing a project recently on hammerhead sharks. I thought that there were like 5 species. Turns out there's 11, and there's actually not a common name for like 2 or 3 of those species because they're so recently found. I think one or two of them were discovered in 2018. So that was super recent. And then I've seen on Shark Week, there's this man, I can't remember his name, but he's found multiple species of deep sea sharks. So obviously the deep ocean is hiding so many secrets that we haven't discovered yet. So it wouldn't be surprising if there's even more sharks down there, or really anything that we haven't discovered.
Okay, you're clear.
Awesome. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about
sorry,
size.
no,
Wait,
you're not.
Okay.
What's the newest shark discovered?
The newest shark discovered. I'm not sure, but the newest one that I personally know about would be one of those hammerhead species. It's I think it was branched off of the bonnethead. It's a smaller species of hammerhead. So that's the newest one that I can remember, but I'm not sure if it is the newest.
Okay, go quickly.
Okay, so for size, we have a huge range of sizes. So we have the whale shark is the largest shark and the largest fish in the ocean. It can get to over 40 feet or 12 meters long, averages around 30 to 35 feet though. And then the second largest is the basking shark, which is also pretty big, doesn't quite compare to the whale shark, but gets pretty large. But then you have this tiny, tiny dwarf lantern shark that maxes out at like 8 inches, 20 centimeters long. So just that huge size comparison, just it's such a huge range. And there's so many sharks that fall in between that range that it just kind of blows my mind. Any questions about this slide?
I'm sure there will be, but they'll probably come in over the next few minutes.
Okay. So for habitat, basically sharks, they inhabit like every ocean in the world, essentially. So I feel like people don't expect sharks to be in cold water, but there are sharks that live in the Arctic. So the Greenland shark, which happens to be believed to be the oldest living vertebrate species on the planet. They found one, did some, I think it was radiocarbon dating, something like that, using isotopes to figure out how old they are. Basically, it's the age range they set for that individual is between 300 and 500 years old. So that's crazy to think about, that these animals can live for that long. But these guys live in the Arctic. I think that's why they can live so long. They just have a very slow lifestyle because they live in the cold. They can't swim very fast. And surprisingly enough, even though they can't swim very fast, they have found remnants of polar bears and reindeer and seals in their stomachs before. So they probably pick up these things after the animal's drowned and it's on the ocean floor or something like that. But they actually do live in the Arctic, which I think is pretty crazy.
Quick question on the basking shark.
Sure.
Why does it have such a large mouth? That's from Josh.
It's a filter feeder. So it just opens its mouth, swims through the water and collects any plankton that's in the area. And the whale shark does the same thing. So yeah, its mouth, it's really funny because when its mouth is closed, it looks kind of normal, and then it opens its mouth and everyone's surprised and is like, that is a monster. But I mean, they're gentle giants. They can't really do anything to you. They don't really have teeth. They just filter feed.
Thank you.
Where was I on? Tiger shark. So we have sharks that live in the tropics, which I think is what people mostly think of when they think of sharks. Tiger sharks tend to live pretty much just near the equator. And there are a lot of sharks that do that, like I've said before, but that's pretty much the thing that people typically think about. But so you've got the Arctic, you've got near the equator and super warm tropical waters. You have a pelagic ecosystem. So the oceanic whitetip is a great example of an organism that lives in the pelagic ecosystem. So that's just the open ocean. You're not really close to land masses. You're not on coral reefs or anything like that. Just literally in the middle of the ocean, you look down, you look to the sides, just blue everywhere. That's where these guys live. I would imagine it's pretty hard for them to find food because even though the ocean's like, there's so much in the ocean, it's so big that when you're out in the middle of the ocean, you might not be able to find a ton of food. And I feel like that's kind of the opposite for the blacktip reef shark because they do live on a reef and it's so highly productive and there's fish everywhere. You can easily find a meal there. So those guys live on reefs. And then you have the cookie cutter shark lives in the deep sea. So like I said before, there are a ton of deep sea secrets that we haven't discovered yet. There's lantern sharks, there's cookie cutter sharks, there's 6-gill, 7-gill sharks, all these sharks that live crazy deep in the ocean. And I feel like people don't necessarily think of anything other than anglerfish living down there, but sharks can live down there too, which I think is really cool.
Right, 2 more questions just before you jump on to the next slide. How many species of sharks are filter feeders? That's from Joanna.
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I don't think I know the answer to that question, quite honestly, but I know that there's the basking shark, the whale shark. I believe the megamouth shark is also a filter feeder, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So I would guess, I know that there's at least 2, but I would guess that there's a few more than that.
And also from Emily, what shark has the cutest name?
The cutest name? Honestly, I feel like cookie cutter is pretty darn cute. What it does is not so cute. It has these like razor sharp teeth on the bottom, and it'll go up to an animal, suction to it, and then scoop out a chunk of its flesh. And so if you see like a dolphin or a seal or even a person with like this perfect circle on its leg or on its side or wherever, that would be a cookie cutter shark. So its name is really cute, but what it does to you is not quite as cute.
Right. Before we ask the next question, I'm just going to warn everyone, we accept no liability for any phobias around swimming that develop as the result of a Cafe Sci event. And the next question is, are there any freshwater sharks?
I I believe that there's one freshwater shark. It was believed to be extinct for a long time. It might be extinct now, but I'm not 100% sure. It is the Ganges river shark in Africa, I want to say. I'm pretty sure that's correct. And it lives exclusively in freshwater. But there are a number of sharks, like the bull shark, that can go between freshwater and saltwater, kind of like a salmon.
And Michael's just confirmed that the megamouth shark is a filter feeder.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. That's all so far.
Okay, so these guys have a ton of different abilities. So starting with glow in the dark sharks, that sounds insane, but I think it is the coolest thing ever. So you have this lantern shark that can do bioluminescence. Basically, bioluminescence is either an organ or a symbiosis with bacteria where you can create your own light, essentially. And it's like this blue glow. Whereas fluorescence is you're taking light in and then reflecting it as this green color that you see. So the lantern shark, which I feel like is very appropriately named, can do bioluminescence, and the swell shark can do fluorescence. So if you were to see these animals in the ocean, you'd be able to see this color under the water in the dark, which I think is just one of the coolest things I've ever heard. Then we have, oh wait, sorry, you have a question?
No, there's a couple of questions which just came in from YouTube.
Oh, sure.
So how do sharks filter feed? Do they use baleen in the same way as whales?
They do not. So they have these gill rakers. So you can see their gill slits on the side. Like you can see, this one's not a filter feeder, but you can see these gill slits on the side. They open their mouth and all of this water and all these particles and plankton flow in, and then their gill rakers will trap that while the water escapes, and then they can swallow it from there.
And another one from Ashley on YouTube, whatever it's called. How big is the cookie cutter shark?
The cookie cutter shark's not super big. I want to say that it doesn't get much bigger than like 2 or 3 feet long. Even that seems a little large, but they're not very large animals. So if you're gonna get bit by a cookie cutter shark, the cookie cut is gonna be about this big. It's not gonna be anything huge.
That's reassuring. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Also, I just want to say, maybe the best way to avoid getting attacked by a cookie cutter shark would be, oh my gosh, my bad. My phone alarm's going off. Anyway, the best way to avoid a cookie cutter shark is to just not swim in the ocean at night. Typically, that's not a great time to swim in the ocean because animals from the deep sea will come up to feed at night, including animals like the cookie cutter shark. Also, sharks feed during dawn and dusk, typically. So stick to the daytime and you'll probably be fine. Okay, so some sharks, like I said before, can regulate their own body temperature because some sharks are, as we would think of it, as warm-blooded. So the salmon shark is a fantastic example of that. They live near Alaska, so the water's really cold, but they can raise their body temperature about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I think that's 6 degrees Celsius above the ambient water temperature. So that is ridiculous to think about considering it's a fish, and most fish just kind of exist at the same temperature as the water. But this guy's like, nah, it's too cold out here. I have to be able to swim really fast. I'm going to heat up my core so that I can swim really fast and catch my prey. So A+ to the salmon shark. They're doing great. Then we have sharks that breach and they jump out of the water. I'm sure if you've ever seen Shark Week, you've seen a great white shark jumping out of the water to try and catch a seal. That's exactly what the spinner shark does, but it quite literally adds a twist to it. So it jumps out of the water and it'll spin before it hits the water again. I think it's a method of catching their prey, potentially avoiding predators. I'm not exactly sure why they spin, but either way, it's really cool and fun to watch. So you can look up YouTube videos of that. I recommend because it's super awesome. Buccal pumping, that's a little bit on the myth that sharks have to keep moving in order to breathe or otherwise they'll die. So we have the zebra shark can buccal or buccal pump. So, sorry, my dog. Basically, what they do is they suck water in through their mouths and then push it over their gills so they can still get the water flow over their gills so they can still breathe. There are a lot of sharks that can't do that. So it is true for some sharks that if they stop moving, they will die, like the great white shark or the bull shark. They can't force water over their gills. They have to keep moving in order to get water over their gills. But there are some species like the zebra shark or the nurse shark, things like that, that can do that and sit on the ground and still be able to breathe. And then we have the epaulet shark. When I tell people that sharks walk on land, they usually have a heart attack. But this guy, first of all, they're not very big. They're super skinny. They're, I don't know, around this long. They're little guys. But basically what happens is when the tide goes out, they'll get stuck in tide pools, and it's the sun's beating down on them. They don't have enough water to keep breathing. But these guys can breathe, or these guys can survive without water for a lot longer than any other shark species. And they use their fins basically to walk back to a larger tide pool or back to the ocean so that they can have a bigger space to swim around and find food. And I think that that's kind of ridiculous, but it's super awesome thinking that a shark can kind of walk around on land.
So we've just got a question about the spinner.
Sure.
Could the spinning increase their accuracy?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Their accuracy of catching prey? Potentially. I'm not sure, but that's a very interesting question. That'd be really cool if it did. I think that'd be a really cool study.
There you go. That's for the next PhD.
Also, I was going to mention, you know how the mako shark is the fastest shark in the ocean? They can also breach, but because they're so fast and they can get to such ridiculous speeds, they can launch themselves like 30 feet straight in the air. So like, I think that's around 9 or 10 meters, which is ridiculous. I can't even imagine being that high over the water.
Yep, that's over the average house in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. Any questions before I keep going?
Could it be spins to make the prey dizzy?
I doubt it, but that would also be really cool.
That's it.
Okay, awesome. So there are a few different types of social behaviors that we see in sharks. Most sharks are solitary, like bull sharks. You don't really see them in groups unless there's a feeding frenzy, which doesn't happen often, especially with bull sharks. They usually hunt by themselves. Sometimes you'll see them in pairs, but it's not common. Same thing with great whites. You're really not going to see them in groups. I think there was a finding on Shark Week that there were potentially brothers that were hunting together, great white sharks, but there's still more like work to be done on that to kind of see what exactly is going on there. And then you can have social groups. So you have scalloped hammerheads we see in this picture that migrate together. I believe this might be a mating congregation, but don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure. But I do believe that they migrate together. So you can see large groups of scalloped hammerheads together. Also, a group of sharks, like a school of sharks, is called a shiver. And I think that that's really cool. Any questions yet?
Yeah, one for me. If you've got hammerhead sharks and sawtooth sharks or something, does that make it a toolbox rather than a shiver?
Does it make it a what? A
Toolbox.
toolbox?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Honestly, we should start using that. That'd be really good.
There is actually a question that's coming. What's the actual truth behind all the myths about sharks smelling blood, such as the myth of don't go swimming when you're on your period? Can sharks actually smell a drop of blood from far away? And I'm assuming there's an extra bit which wasn't written in, which is around, is the feeding frenzy a real thing?
Feeding frenzies can be a real thing. So if you see someone drop in like a big bucket of chum and a whole bunch of sharks come up to feed from that, that's like a feeding frenzy, but they're not like being aggressive about it. They're just trying to get food before somebody else takes it all, right? And as for the shark smelling blood, they have a really good sense of smell and they can smell blood from far away, but it's not quite to the extent that people make it out to be. So I think there was something like they can smell 1 drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's not true. That's kind of ridiculous, but they do have a really good sense of smell. Also, if you're going to go swimming on your period, I really don't think that that's going to be an issue for you. Just, I mean, really, there's a lot that goes into shark attacks, way more than just smelling blood, which I will also get into later. But it's a little blown out of proportion how their smelling blood capabilities really are.
And we've had another one this time from Martin on YouTube. What species of sharks have the largest denticles? I don't know what denticles are, but
Ooh, I will also explain denticles in a little bit. Basically, it's their skin. It's kind of like little teeth that make up their skin. I don't know which shark species has the largest denticles. I don't know. I would assume the larger the shark, the larger the denticle, but that might be like thinking the larger the animal, the more the bigger the cells are, but that's not necessarily true. So I'm not sure which species has the largest denticles, but now I want to look that up later.
if you want to tweet it out later, we'll retweet it and make sure the answer gets out.
Sure, yeah, I can do that. If hopefully I find an answer.
Okay, that's it for questions again for now.
Okay, cool. They have a whole bunch of different modes of feeding as well. So we've talked about filter feeding. We know that the vast majority of them are predatory. So the great white shark is the largest predatory fish in the world. We know that it hunts like seals, it'll eat dead whale carcasses, things like that. And then we talked about our filter feeders, whale sharks, basking sharks, the megamouth shark. We talked about how they do their filter feeding, just letting particles get stuck in their gill rakers so that they can eat it. And it's interesting to me that like the blue whale is the largest animal on the planet, and it's a filter feeder, which seems interesting because it's the largest animal eating some of the smallest animals. But the same goes for these largest shark species. I'm not exactly sure how that's working, but it's just an interesting thing to think about. And then this was a relatively recent discovery. There is one known omnivorous shark species. It is predominantly carnivorous. However, it can eat seagrasses and has gut microbes in order to help it digest those seagrasses. And that would be the bonnethead shark, this little hammerhead species down here. I think that is the coolest thing. I freaked out about that discovery for like a week and a half and would not stop talking about it. My friends were like, that's not that interesting. And I was like, you don't understand. This is the only one we know of. But yeah, so an omnivorous shark seems super weird, but apparently there's one of them. Questions yet? I don't want to keep going and like lose people or anything.
I'm juggling screens, but no, I don't think there are any. But we do have something in the chat, which is Google, which is not necessarily a reliable source. I don't know how much they know about sharks, but they say the Greenland shark has the largest denticles.
Ooh, interesting. I'm trying to think of like why that would be. That's really interesting though. Cool. Well, thank you for whoever looked that up.
It's okay. We've got our own fact checkers, full-time employment, paid absolutely nothing. A question from Leanne. What do you know about Megalodon?
Megalodon. I love Megalodon. It is a prehistoric shark. It lived, it may have overlapped with very early humans, which is interesting, but it did go extinct, I think, around like 2-3 million years ago, something like that. It was larger than the largest whale sharks, which is crazy to think about. So basically, it was like if you took a great white shark and you made it 60 feet long. There's so many conspiracy theories about like, oh my gosh, the megalodon's probably not extinct. It's for sure extinct. There is nothing large enough for the megalodon to eat. There are not enough whales to satiate an entire population of megalodons. They're definitely extinct. And though the ocean is huge, I feel like we would have found one by now if it wasn't extinct. But yeah, they were these huge prehistoric sharks. the largest one of their teeth, I think, was around 7 inches long, which is crazy. Yeah, kind of glad that they're not around. That would be really scary for us at the beach. So
I was going to say, anything where you say there's not enough whales to sustain them, it's, yeah, I'm kind of glad they're extinct.
yeah,
That's it for questions for now.
okay, awesome. So I feel like a lot of people think that most sharks just lay eggs, but a lot of sharks, and I want to say most sharks, don't lay eggs. But we do have a few, obviously. So we have the horn shark. The horn shark lays eggs. That's this little guy up here. Their eggs have like these spirals on them, so they can wedge them into crevices and make sure that they don't get eaten or blown away by the wind or whatever. That way, the mother shark can make sure that the egg is in a productive area. So when the baby hatches, it has a lot of food. Then we have ovoviviparous. Egg laying is called oviparous. Ovoviviparous is when the shark has eggs and the eggs hatch inside the mother and then it gives live birth. Sounds kind of crazy, but I think it's kind of cool, especially in the sand tiger shark. So the sand tiger shark has 2 uteruses, and from each uterus, one baby will emerge. And the way that works is one egg will hatch before the other eggs, or the strongest individual will then eat all of its siblings, and then one victor from each uterus will come out, and then you have twins. It's kind of ridiculous, but that's kind of like the epitome of survival of the fittest, I guess. And then we have some shark species, I believe, that are viviparous. I've looked this up. I feel like there's still some debate about it, but basically viviparous means that you have a placenta that's providing nutrients for the baby from the mother, and then you give live birth, kind of like humans. So through my research, not like my research, but as in like Google searches and trying to find credible sources that give me information about this, the smooth hound shark is viviparous, and that's really all I know about that. I feel like there's still some debate around that. I'm not 100% sure about viviparity in sharks, but I know for sure that these other 2 modes of reproduction are pretty common within sharks, oviparous and ovoviviparous. And then to tell the difference between male and female sharks, because I get this question all the time, especially when I was working at an aquarium, I would say, oh, she's a big girl. And someone would say, how do you know it's a she? So as you can see down here, I have a little image for you. Males have claspers, these little modified fins that stick out underneath their pelvic fins. Females do not have that. So if you see claspers, it's a male. If it doesn't have claspers, it's a female. Sound good? Any questions?
Which is most dangerous?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
I'm assuming most dangerous to humans, but arguably I'd be more interested in which is most dangerous, male or female?
I guess it kind of depends. That's a really good question. Honestly, I don't think that there is an answer for that yet. Potentially males because more testosterone. But I feel like sharks kind of, when they have their territory, they will defend it, whether it's male or female. And I know that some shark species, like the great white, will give you a warning sign when you've been in their territory for too long. So they'll lower their pectoral fins, they'll open their mouth a little bit more, and that's kind of a sign that's like, you need to leave before I get really angry, because this is my space and you're invading it. And that's when you know, maybe I should get back on the boat and go home.
And we've got a couple more. How close do you need to get to see if a shark has claspers?
Oh, you can see it from pretty far away. I think I can see it honestly in this picture. So you can see right here under these fins right here, you don't really see anything, but you can see something kind of sticking out right here. That makes me think that this individual is a male and this one is a female. The claspers are pretty long in sharks. They're not very long in stingrays, so that's a little bit harder to tell. But in sharks, yeah, you can see it from like the aquarium window if they're swimming around. So it's not, you don't have to get like up close and personal and like risk an attack or something like that. Like you can see it from pretty far away.
And can the great white shark grow bigger?
Grow bigger.
Is there a limit to how big they grow?
I think the largest one ever found was 21 feet long, which is a crazy large shark. But that was a while ago. I'm not exactly sure when, but the picture I saw of it was black and white, if that tells you anything. So it was a long time ago, but that's the largest they've ever found. I don't think that they've found any that size. You'll get close to 20 feet, but I think 21 feet is pretty much max for them.
Okay, and just going back to the megalodon.
Mhm.
So I apologize for my pronunciation here. Its genus was changed from Carcharodon, same as the great white, to Carcharodles, Cacoracles. Do you know the reason for the change?
I do not know the reason for that change. They probably did potentially some sort of taxonomy changes all the time, so it's hard to tell. Like, skunks went from being in the same group as weasels to being in their own family. And I guess it's just based on new discoveries, whether it's genetic or otherwise. They just kind of realized that maybe it's not as closely related as we thought. So that's probably what changed, is they were like, oh, it's super closely related. It looks exactly the same. And then as they looked further into it, they were like, oh, it's not as closely related as we thought. We should put it in a different genus. I don't know exactly what the change was that they found, but that's typically how that goes.
Okay, I think we're good for questions for now.
Okay. So a few misconceptions about sharks. Like I said before, people think that if they don't keep swimming, they will die. That's only true for some sharks, and it's completely false for others. Like I said, like the nurse shark or any shark that lays on the bottom can do buccal pumping and will be just fine without moving. Other people think that shark skin looks very soft. It's not. If you're going to be working with individuals for a long period of time and constantly touching them, you should probably wear gloves, because it feels like sandpaper. And I saw on Shark Week, this one person was helping work with sharks for hours on end, but he was so excited that he forgot his gloves. By the end of the day, his fingertips were peeling off because the skin is so rough. And you can see in this picture, these are the dermal denticles. It looks like teeth for their skin. So it's just so rough on your hands. So it's not soft. It's basically sandpaper and might hurt a little bit if you try to pet a shark. So, in general, maybe don't try petting sharks, but yeah, so it's not soft at all. And then the most common misconception I see is that sharks are mindless killers. 100% false. They are not just going to attack you just to attack you. There are reasons that shark attacks happen. I love this meme so much because it's super true. Saying shark-infested waters is like saying human-infested households. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. That's where you live. That's your home. And the same goes for sharks. They live in the water. That's their home. So sharks will attack people for a few different reasons. They might not know what you are. And the same thing for a dog. They don't have hands. They're going to use their mouths. The problem is their teeth are really sharp and they're way stronger and bigger than us. So it causes problems for us. But if they don't know what we are, they're going to do what they can to figure out what we are. They will also attack if they're provoked, obviously. If they're defending their territory or they think that you are a threat, they can attack you just like they would attack any other shark that's in their territory that's trying to hurt them. They're going to do something about it. They're going to try to protect themselves, which we would do the same thing in any situation. So you really can't blame the shark for that. And another reason they could attack is because you look like prey. So if you're on a surfboard and you're wearing a black wetsuit, you could look like a seal or a sea lion or a sea turtle, which are all super common prey items for sharks. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see people like surfers getting attacked by sharks, because a great white shark thinks that you're a sea lion and that's its like primary prey item. So of course it's going to attack you. But most people don't get consumed by sharks. So the minute they bite into you, they're like, that's not what I thought it was, and they'll let you go. And like I said before, the problem is that they're just way bigger and stronger than us and have really sharp teeth. So it causes problems for us, but they're not viciously trying to hurt us. They just think that we're something that they typically eat. When they realize that we're not, they leave us alone. And sharks don't kill that many people a year. They only kill on average 4 or 5 people a year. We kill millions and millions and millions of sharks every year for food sources, through bycatch, because it killed someone and we want to redeem that person. I don't know, for a whole bunch of different reasons, but we kill millions of sharks every year, and that's causing huge problems for shark populations. And it's important to make sure that we keep these populations intact because they are pretty much the apex predators of the ocean. If you lose apex predators of the ocean, you have no idea what kind of imbalance we could start, and it could cause huge issues for basically the entire world. But some fun facts that I love to share with people who are terrified by sharks: you are way more likely to get killed by a flying champagne cork, a falling coconut, a cow, a dog, a lightning strike, or a vending machine. A vending machine, of all things. It doesn't even move, but you're more likely to get killed by a vending machine than a shark, because that's just the reality of it. Sharks don't attack people just for fun. They attack us for the reasons that I explained earlier. It's really not out of aggression. It's out of fear, protection, curiosity, or because they thought you were prey. So basically, we should respect sharks. We should leave them alone in their habitat. I will mention though, I went to an amazing talk by Dr. David Schiffman relatively recently, and it was a talk all about sustainable shark fisheries, which that's entirely possible. You can have sustainable shark fisheries the same way you can have sustainable tuna fisheries or sustainable cod fisheries or whatever, because they're just like any other fish in the ocean. But we just have to be able to do it right and make sure that we're doing our part to make sure that we aren't over harvesting these animals, and making sure that the species that are endangered, we're making sure that we take care of them so that they can continue to survive and provide their services to the ocean.
Okay, and we've got a few more questions from Martin on YouTube. What are mutations that occur in sharks, and have you seen any in person?
Ooh, I have not seen any in person. I live in the desert of Arizona, so really the only sharks I've ever seen were in the aquarium that I worked at. They were super fun to work with, but I personally have not seen any mutations. I think that there's a picture somewhere of a shark that has one eye. I don't know if that was a movie prop or if that was real. I honestly have no idea. So I'm not sure of all the different types of mutations that can occur, but I would imagine that there's a bunch, because mutations can occur in literally all the animals. So.
And we've got a couple more. So what are your favorite episodes of Shark Week? That's from Michael.
Ooh, I think my favorite ever is they did a study on the interactions between American alligators, I believe. I'm not good with crocodilians, but American alligators and bull sharks, because like I said, bull sharks can move from saltwater to freshwater. So these sharks were swimming up rivers, and obviously there are crocodilians in these rivers. They want to see how they interact because they have to be interacting in some way. They put a shark in what's called tonic immobility. So they flipped it upside down, and that basically it just kind of loses every ability for some reason, and it just like sits there and is like, wow, spa day, I don't know. And then they brought out pheromones from the crocodile or alligator, and they put it in front of the shark's nose, and rather than doing nothing, it completely freaked out, flipped itself back over, and swam away, which is something that you don't often see. You can do that with like big sharks and put food in front of it and it won't move. But once it sensed that pheromone, it got scared because it thought that there was a predator nearby, and it bolted, which that's just the coolest thing I've ever seen. That was a really interesting discovery. So that's probably my favorite episode of Shark Week ever.
And one from Ashley on YouTube. What about sharks in aquariums? Does it cause them harm?
It depends on the shark. So great white sharks don't do well in aquariums. They need a lot of space. But there are species like smaller species or reef species that can do just fine. So cat sharks are pretty small. They can live in groups and they just sit there. I mean, they're like cats, cat sharks. They just kind of sit there, they hang out, they lay around. They're totally fine in captivity. The species that I had at the aquarium that I worked at were sand tiger sharks, sandbar sharks, nurse sharks, and lemon sharks, all of which are reef species. So they don't really deal with a lot of super deep water. So the area that they have, which also was the largest exhibit in the entire aquarium at like 400,000 gallons or something like that, they were totally fine swimming around, and they didn't seem to have any issues. Additionally, they're on a feeding schedule. So people wonder why they don't eat the other fish in the exhibit, or when divers go down to clean the exhibit, they're like, oh, why aren't they attacking the people? They're just so full because they eat 3 times a week. Whereas in the wild, they would only eat, I don't know, a few times a month if they can catch prey. So, I mean, it seems like a pretty good life to me. You get free meals and you get to hang out with no predators.
And a couple more. First one is, why do they lie still if you flip them on their back?
I'm not quite sure. If I had to take a guess, I would assume that it has something to do with either the ampullae of Lorenzini on their nose, which is an electroreceptor. I think they use it to detect magnetic fields, but I know they use it to detect electric fields from prey items. It might have something to do with that. I have literally no idea. That would just be my guess because they're flipped over. Maybe it's not functioning right, or maybe it has something to do with their lateral line system. But honestly, I have no idea. Those are just my random guesses.
And possibly more importantly, how do you flip a shark on its back?
Oh, great question. I'm assuming a lot easier with a smaller shark. And again, because the shark's not going to just attack you, because at this point, if you're that close to it, it kind of knows what you are. I've seen people, they kind of grab the tip of its nose and put their hand on its back and then just slowly start to turn it until it's upside down. I don't recommend doing it, especially if you have no experience with sharks, but it's kind of interesting to see. So if you watch Shark Week, I'm sure you've seen it a bunch of times, but yeah.
Okay, that's it for questions.
Cool. I think that was my last slide. Yeah. So if there are any more questions or statements or any questions about sharks, anything.
Sure there will be. Give me 1 second to just
Sure.
shuffle things around a bit. Yeah, thank you for that hugely. And normally if people want to applaud, we do rapid clicking and unclicking of the raise hand button because it's the closest we can get.
I think there's
so
applause
you've
button.
got applause, and there will almost certainly be more questions coming in for a while now. But while we just wait for them, I'm going to take over to advertise what we've got coming up. So next Thursday, we're breaking from our regular cycle, and we will have our first special quarterly quiz, which will have rounds based on all of the talks we've had to date, including sharks. So we'll have a few questions on each topic. You're welcome to join in teams. We've got a way to drop you into teams. We'll be looking at letting people take part over Twitter and various other ways. So all sorts of options to jump in, take part. And if you are the winning team, which will be decided after the end of that event, because we'll need time to just mark and make sure all of the marks come through, you can be installed on our brand new Hall of Fame that's going to be going up. So yeah, come along to that. Good luck if you're joining the quiz, and do pick out your teams, or say if you want to be assigned to a random team. On next Saturday, we've got a talk on talking about science, which has a lot of talkings on it. That's from Ashley Holob, and that's on science communication and how it works. And I'm now going to go back to video because we have had more questions come in already. So I'll grab one from YouTube first. Aside from open cage diving with a great white, what else do you plan on accomplishing in the future?
I just want to help provide information to the scientific community and as well as the public, by doing my research. That way we can better protect the sharks that are endangered. That's really my ultimate goal. Another goal, I'd love to be on Shark Week. Honestly, that would be one of the coolest things ever because I've been watching it since I was a kid. So I think that would be super cool. Other things, I don't know. Honestly, I just want to help people fall in love with animals like I have, show them why it's so important to make sure that we protect them and keep them around, make sure that they don't go extinct. So, science communication and just kind of bringing more information into the scientific community so that we can do more with it. Those are my biggest goals.
And a few more. I'm going to reinterpret this one. Who was the first person to think of rolling a shark on its back and why?
Fantastic question. I don't know who did it. I don't know why they did it. I can't even think of a reason as to why you'd be like, wonder what would happen if you took this 400-pound monster and tried to touch it and then flip it on its back. Because what if for some reason it didn't go into tonic immobility and lost its mind on you and like tried to bite you? That would be a terrible outcome. But someone decided that that was a good idea. Maybe they already knew a ton about sharks and was like, I know that this will happen. I don't know who did it or why, but it happened. So
Well, possibly the question is, who was the first person to survive trying it?
honestly, yeah, good question.
Where did your love of sharks come from?
Shark Week. So it's funny because my favorite animal ever, still to this day, is not a shark. It is the African elephant. I love them. And so I've always watched a ton of Animal Planet and Discovery Channel about elephants, and that led to looking at other animals because I've always been in love with animals. And then I saw Shark Week and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm afraid of sharks. Maybe this will help me not be afraid of sharks. That it sure worked. I'm not afraid of sharks anymore. And so I just kind of saw how much we don't know about them and how much they're misunderstood, and figured that I kind of want to be one of those scientists to help fix the damage that's been done by the media, and show people that sharks aren't evil. They're good and they're helpful. They're needed in our environments. So yeah, Shark Week, short answer.
There's one comment on chickens go into tonic immobility if you turn them on their backs. So maybe other animals do the same. And that's possibly why someone got the idea to do it in sharks. Although I have to say, if I got a chicken paralyzed, I wouldn't immediately think I'm going to go try this on a shark.
Yeah, I would try other birds first. I don't know if other fish do it and someone was like, let's try a shark next. I don't know. That's really interesting.
And in the publicity photo for this event, you were holding something orange. What was it?
I get that question a lot. Okay, so it was a sea anemone attached to a glass bottle that we had just trawled up from the bottom of the Salish Sea in Washington. I was paid $5 to lick it. Don't do that. It was a bad idea. It tasted like I was eating salt. It was a very poor choice. But I did it for some reason. Don't recommend, but that's what that was. And that's why my tongue is out in the picture.
Okay. So have you ever actually eaten sea anemone as food?
Oh gosh, no.
It is extremely salty.
I would imagine so.
Right, from Greg, is there anything known about goblin sharks?
Ooh, I love goblin sharks. So there's a little bit known about them. First, a little bit of self-promotion. My animal fact videos that I post on YouTube and on TikTok, I did an animal fact video about goblin sharks recently. Their jaws are super weird. So if you've ever seen one, very fittingly named, basically their nose is like thin and long and their jaws are hidden inside it. And then when it sees prey, its jaws go like this and then retreat back into its head. So it's attached to ligaments. Ligaments? Yes, ligaments that allow it to stretch and then shoot back in. It's a really weird thing to see happen. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend looking up YouTube videos of it because it's really interesting. Basically, like their body doesn't really move because their jaws can move so much, like so independently of the rest of its body. That's what I know about goblin sharks. They can get, I can't remember how big they get, so I'm not even going to try to guess. But yeah, they're super interesting animals. If you're interested in learning more about them, you can Google them, or I'm sure there's resources on Discovery Channel. They're super interesting. Look up YouTube videos of them. They're really cool.
We know what got you interested in sharks now, so that one's been answered, but there's two more from Andy. What's your favorite shark?
This goes back and forth between the bonnethead shark and the thresher shark. I think the thresher shark is really cool because it has a whip for a tail, but the bonnethead has such a cute little derpy little like umbrella head, and it's so cute. So I kind of go back and forth, but I have this thing where I love tattooing cool animals on my body. I already have guitarfish and stingrays. I plan on getting both thresher sharks and the bonnethead stuck on my body for the rest of my life. So yeah.
Possibly related to the tattoos, do you have any cool shark-related injuries?
I don't have any injuries, but I do have a funny story of when I was working at the aquarium. It was our first day as interns, me and my two friends, and we were going down by the shark exhibit so we could take a look at it and the surrounding exhibits. So we went down and we were on this like blue platform, and the water was like an inch below us, and like right in front of us. So just open right there. While I was climbing down the ladder, the biggest shark in the exhibit, a lemon shark, splashed the heck out of all three of us. And this was orientation day. So we had no idea what was happening. We were so new to this. We didn't know where we were going. And our mentor thought that one of us fell in. Rather than asking if we were okay, he immediately started laughing because he knew nothing bad was going to happen to us. But it was really funny because she was like, this shark, she was like, welcome to the aquarium, rookies. You're going to have fun here. It was really funny.
Okay, that's it for questions. And I think it's a good story to end on, unless we suddenly get some last minute ones coming in. I've put Jada's Twitter handle up there, which I think I've spelt right. And it is a really clever handle. Do follow her. The animal facts videos are fantastic. I highly recommend them.
Thank you.
And they're definitely worth a watch. Thank you for coming on. It's been great. Thank you for doing our first special event and our first Shark Saturday, Sharktastic Day. We'll work that out for the next time we do one. But good night, everyone, or good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are. Time zones are confusing, and hopefully we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.